ձեզ։ Այսօր հյուրընկալել ենք ՄԱԿ-ի Մարդու իրավունքների խորհրդի նախագահ Federico Villegasին։ Good day, Mr. Villegas. Welcome to Armenia. So you're here to participate in the fourth Global Forum against the crime of genocide. What is the importance of organizing such forums in this period, and what are your impressions?
Well, I think it's a very important forum. You know, before we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 10th of December of 1948, the day before, the 9th of December of 1948, there was the adoption of the convention, the International Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And so we need to address in the international community all strategies for the prevention of genocide, and this fourth forum is analyzing a very important subject, which is the use of new technologies and how to prevent genocide with the use of new technologies. I'm very impressed by the organization, by the Global Forum and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, and I'm very glad to be here in Yerevan for the first time.
Usually genocides are either committed by governments or perpetrated with a tacit approval or inaction of the government. And since other governments cannot intervene in the internal affairs of another government, how can the world prevent crimes of genocide?
Well, first of all, the notion of international law of human rights is precisely this idea, revolutionary idea, that a person has rights beyond being a national of a state or a religion or a culture, and the whole international community has to protect collectively those rights. So after the Second World War, it was clear with the adoption of the convention that we cannot be indifferent when genocides or issues and elements of a genocide is happening in any country. And that's why at the Human Rights Council we address many situations, urgent situations, that have reports that need an early warning to address things that might end up in a genocide. Because we know that all genocides do not happen overnight. It's a process. Each genocide, a mass atrocity, it's a process with different stages. Starts with different. It can be 8 to 10 stages, and some start with dehumanizing, stigmatization, classification, and of course the last stage is extermination. So in all the reports that we have in the Council on discrimination of people all over the world, we try to see the early warnings, and we have 13 mechanisms that investigate violations of human rights in different countries of the world.
This year marked the 74th anniversary of the Convention for Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide 7 decades later. However, do we have an effective and robust system of prevention at the international level? If yes, then how come that genocides still occur? And if not, then what else should we do to make the system effective?
We do have an important system, because we have to think that before the Universal Declaration and before the Convention on Genocide on 9th December 1948, international law was the law that regulated the norms between states. For 300 years, we had international law, and that law didn't care about people. What each state did with the people inside its state was not a matter of other states. And this idea of human rights and the convention and the 10 treaties that we have, over 45 mechanisms of different issues to address human rights. The Human Rights Council, it's only 74 years old, so it's a very young idea that is why we are developing new issues every year. In this last session, we approved a resolution on cyberbullying, another resolution on disinformation, another resolution on the impact of new military technologies in human rights. So I think that we have many mechanisms to prevent. We have special rapporteurs, we have the Office of the High Commissioner, we have the treaties that the different countries have committed to and are obliged to fulfill all their obligations in those treaties. But of course, we need to do more. We need to do more, and at this moment, with the social media and the access to information, but also this automatic use of technology to express ourselves, technology can be used for the good, but also can be used for the bad, unfortunately, like hate speech, an international crime. So I think we are in a good track, but many things around the world tell us that we have to keep moving and strengthening the system of human rights in the UN.
The propaganda, and specifically hate-inducing propaganda, was widely used by the Nazis. We live at a time when media, and especially the online social media, is again used extensively for propaganda and xenophobia and hatred. Another aspect of propaganda is, as you mentioned, the humanization of prospective victims. Can we consider this as an early warning sign for future possible genocides? What should we do both at international and national levels?
The most important thing is to strengthen the UN systems. And give you an example. In 1993, there was a journalist, a Belgian journalist, living in Kigali in Rwanda. He was a famous radio broadcaster. At that time, we didn't have internet or anything. But on the radio, he was calling people to go and kill Tutsis, and he called them cockroaches that need to be exterminated. That was done on the radio. And he was sentenced by the International Tribunal of Rwanda for inciting to genocide. So what I mean is that's an early warning. We cannot allow somebody to go public on the radio and say something. So that's one thing. The second thing is the rapporteurs. The independent experts of the United Nations are the most important early warning that something is wrong in a country or in an issue or in a situation. In 1993 also, the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Executions, which is a very important rapporteur and mechanism expert, he was telling the Commission of Human Rights what was going on in Rwanda and how Tutsis were being persecuted and the hate speech and exterminated. And 1 year before the genocide, he was telling the international community, and nobody paid attention to him. That report was just listened to in Geneva, but never made to the Security Council of the United Nations, and the Security Council never took an action to stop the genocide. And he warned about this coming 1 year before the genocide started, on April 7th, 1994. And 800,000 people were killed in less than 2 months. So that is a concrete way of strengthening early warning, to give credit and listen and act upon the reports that the United Nations create to address these serious situations.
And just as again mentioned, this year's forum is dedicated to the prevention of genocide in the era of new technologies and will address challenges, opportunities, and perspectives of utilizing new tech for prevention of genocide. What would you suggest as a possible topic for the next global forum?
Well, I think it should be a link, like an update of this year's forum. And I will involve children and education. I think that, we had for the first time in history in the Human Rights Council, I proposed to have a day called Bring Your Children to the Council Day. So over 200 children came to the council and they became the Human Rights Council. One girl was the president and the others represented countries. And when they discussed technology and their rights. And they said, we like technology because we are connected, we can connect with our friends, but we don't like cyberbullying, we don't like hate speech. So many children today are being stigmatized. Even we have depression and suicide of children because of what they see, if people like or not like them on the social media. So I think the next forum should involve youth. That's just an idea, of course. Youth, children and the prevention of genocide in the matter of acceptance of diversity and difference in other opinion. Because a genocide starts when something that is called otherness. A certain part of a society decides to create this idea of otherness, of another group of the society that is different. And that is the first stage. And that difference is what makes that group of people be so far away from the ones that make that difference that they start dehumanizing and end up in extermination. So if we can have a forum to prevent youth and children to become to not to be supportive of diversity in society, to understand each other. So I think that it will be important to have education and technology and children and youth.
And Mr. Villegas, in 2015, Armenia led the international efforts to designate December 9 as the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of Genocide and of the prevention of this crime. In your opinion, what impact will this official attribution have in terms of awareness raising and prevention?
Well, it's very important, and I admire very much the Armenia, how moves forward consequently the agenda of prevention of genocide in different international fora. Today's forum, of course, is an example, but also at the Human Rights Council, Armenia presented in this session, in this year, while I was president, the resolution on the prevention of genocide that was approved by consensus by all the membership of the United Nations. And that is the one that put this item in the agenda for this forum. So I think the issue of the victims is the most important one. We have to deal with our past and in that case the testimonies of the victims, and also sometimes the generations after the victims have to keep the memory, and education is fundamental. What we teach our kids, how we teach our kids, our history is very, very important. So I think that this commemoration that Armenia put forward in the UN as a proposal that was accepted is very, very important for all violations of human rights, but on a mass atrocity like a genocide, is even more important.
And I would also like to speak about the issue of denialism, as mentioned, and calls to forget the past in order to move forward. What is your opinion on that? Could societies move forward without real reconciliation when it comes to such an ultimate crime as genocide?
Well, I think that it's very important to deal with our past in order to build our future. It's very difficult to build a new human rights agenda of modern issues, present issues on discrimination or social economical rights or right to health. How can you build very strong new human rights agenda if you don't address an atrocity of your past? So I think, but you know, in these cases we have four pillars: memory, justice, truth, and reparations. Those are the four that with different levels of development, all countries that pass difficult situations have addressed that. But sometimes it's difficult because the history is taught in different ways. And the important thing is to talk about it and try to reconcile ourselves and understand that maybe in part of our history we looked at things in a different way. I come from Argentina, as you know, and Argentina has a very, very sad history, recent history of violations of human rights, massive and systematic. But it took us 20 years for us to reconcile with our past, with memory, justice, truth, and reparation. So it's a process. Each country has its own process according to its own context, historical and political.
And one of the most important warring issues for Armenia is the repatriation of Armenian prisoners of war. I think you have seen the videos of how Azerbaijani soldiers torture and shoot Armenian prisoners of war. And of course, there were many calls from the international community to investigate, to thoroughly investigate the case. But how would you describe such terrific practice in the 21st century?
Well, definitely, whatever. If there is the allegation of a violation of human rights or humanitarian law, because you have, as you know, those type of laws, the international humanitarian law that deals precisely what the law in an armed conflict, the obligations in an armed conflict, like it was in this case, and international human rights. All alleged violations can be addressed in by different rapporteurs or different treaty parties, and also we know perfectly the involvement of the International Red Cross also in the conflict and post-conflict. So in my case, of course, as president of the Human Rights Council, I chair the meetings where the delegation of Armenia and the delegation of Azerbaijan have addressed the situation in that region, and each of them, of course, showed and expressed before the council their views on what was going on. And I respect the dialogue and the difference of opinion in the council. That's my role as president. It's not to decide who is right or who is wrong, but what I'm certain is that we have the mechanisms for any type of violations of human rights anywhere in the world to be addressed by independent experts. So it's just a matter to use the right mechanisms to bring to the attention of the international community whatever we think is necessary to be brought.
And Mr. Villegas, a number of human rights defenders and institutes engaged in genocide research are warning that the Armenian population of Artsakh is in danger of genocide. As you know, the Azerbaijani side today closed the gas flow. It's also closing the humanitarian corridor connecting Artsakh to Armenia. In the face of humanitarian disaster, as the president of the United Nations Human Rights Council, is the issue of the rights of the Armenians of Artsakh in the center of your attention? And also, how do you assess the closure of the corridor of humanitarian importance?
So far, it's not in the agenda of the Council. We listen, as I said in the previous question, the Council listens to the statements of NGOs and governments. That's basic, and independent experts. Those are the source of the information we get in the Council. So it's not part of the agenda of the Council, and the delegation of Armenia and the delegation of Azerbaijan have expressed their views on this issue. But definitely, like the other question, it's not for me to address a situation on the bilateral relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan and any other country of the world. It's not in my job description. So I apologize, but no comment on that question.
Thanks for the interview, Mr. Villegas. Այսօր իմ հյուրն էր ՄԱԿ-ի Մարդու իրավունքների խորհրդի նախագահ Federico Villegas-ը, հաջողություն։